country, a lot of people will say, well, it's all administrative law now. Well, if that's your case law, then the administrative law is your common law. Because common law is formed by case law specifically. It's right in the Black's Law Dictionary that common law comes from case law. So it's the common law of your land, not all over the planet, because everyone's common law is not the same on this planet.
Okay, so, but haven't we heard over the years of people going after the judge's bond and stuff like that, David Williams, and being able to get some kind of remedy where they get a guy off the case? And maybe I've even heard of some, I don't know if it's urban legend, that they retired and stuff because somebody was able to get to him. Like, isn't there a story of Tim Turner that supposedly, and I don't even know Tim Turner or any of his stuff, but, you know, his name gets out there because he's doing this Restore America thing. That he was able to get some judges to step down. Is that true? That you know of?
Yeah, we got judges to step down, too, when we were doing the things that we did way back in 2000, 2001.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't have anything to do with attacking their bonds.
Okay.
And, you know, here again, claims to be an American. He claims to be a U.S. citizen. And I call these things, Patrick, unfortunately, and I'm going to get very serious about this, I call them dragnets. They're not doing a single thing differently than the Montana Freeman did in the 90s. Not one single thing.
Sounds dangerous to me.
It is very dangerous, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it just kind of, well, we won't even go there. Okay, the Law of Nations. What exactly is that, and who got together and did that?
Well, the Law of Nations has been written in several different books called the Law of Nations, but it's kind of like revisions. Vattel is one that's widely promoted and talked about. You can actually type it into a Google search, and it's Vattel. That's Vattel, and you can actually find the entire book on the Law of Nations. This is how the nations operate. You know, what was interesting to me, Patrick, was when I actually first read that in the Constitution. And I, by the way, did not read the Constitution until I was 39 years old. They don't get us to read the Constitution in school. They just tell you, here's the Constitution, and here's what it means.
Sure.
Have a nice day. And that's a presumption and assumption that here's what it means because you didn't read it. So when I read it, and I looked at this term, the Law of Nations, the first thing that popped into my mind is, what in the world is this book? What is it? What is the Law of Nations? I didn't know it was a book. What is it? The Law of Nations. I had heard things like one world government. I'm having visions of Law of Nations, and the reality is that the Law of Nations is actually older than people think, because it's thousands of years old. It was finally put into books and writings in about 1200 AD as an operational system for how nation states work among one another. But treaties actually go back further than that. They go back a lot further than that. Constitutions actually go back further than that. 85%, every nation on this planet has a constitution. Britain had one before this Constitution was drafted, so that constitutions are no big deal, in a sense that they've been around for thousands of years. And if you don't believe they've been around for thousands of years, the Latin root constitutio specifically says laws promulgated, i.e. enacted by the Roman emperor.
So if this Law of Nations, David, is a book, why is it relevant or have any meaning? Who wrote it? Who signed it? Why does it even mean anything? It's some old book.
Because the nations on this planet have agreed by protocol that they adopt, that they are going to follow the Law of Nations, which is why the United States, in their Constitution, those 39 men, that's why they put it in there, that they would follow the premises and precepts set down in the Law of Nations.
Oh, and other people do the same thing, other countries?
Yes, they do.
So what does this Law of Nations say? It's probably a big book. I mean, you can't do the whole thing, but what does it say? I mean, what's the idea behind it?
Well, I can't go into a lot of what it says because it's voluminous. This book is not 2 pages long like the Constitution. It's
what's the general idea? Is there a general premise of the whole thing? Of why they did this?
Let me give my premise out of the book, okay? This was my premise. This is what I took from the book, because this is what I knew specifically would apply to me in my life, and getting free from what I looked at was tyranny and despotism. How are we going to do it? Form a new government. And it specifically says in the Law of Nations that if you belong to a state, if you're a citizen or subject under the king or whatever, that you have a right, if you cannot get a redress from the king, if you cannot get a redress from the government, as it states in the Maryland Declaration, that if the government becomes perverted and all means of redress are ineffectual and the public liberties manifestly in danger, that men should of right either reform the old or form a new government. And I will contend with you, Patrick, that there's never, ever in history been one single government that's ever been reformed, specifically after it got perverted. And what it says in the Law of Nations is this, that if you could not get anything done, then you had the right to exile. You had the right to leave and go form something new.
Not necessarily change those guys or take them over, just leave and do something else.
And this is why every nation on this planet exists. Today, however, and I'll tell you this, today, this right is not called the right of exile anymore. They changed it in treaties in 1947 to the right of self-determination.
The right of self-determination. I like the way that sounds.
Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, it's beautiful. It sounds great, you know.
Yeah, the right to self-determine, the right to come together as a group of people and self-govern and do what it is that you want to do, and then treaty with them. By the way, I'll tell you what they did too, Patrick. I'm going to give you two things that are important. Number one, in the movie The Matrix, which was all about the right of self-determination, which was how Zion was going to peacefully coexist alongside the Matrix. That was the goal of the movie. There is a gentleman in the movie called the Keymaker, and he is the most important figure in the movie because he's the one that had the key. And in the movie, he was called the Exile. But before he passed that key, he was killed, and he passed the key to Neo. He had the key that fit the door. Mm-hmm. And as the Oracle had told Neo, why were programs deleted? Why would they seek out exile in the Matrix? And she said, well, maybe it breaks down, or maybe a better program gets written. In 1947, the international community wrote a better program, and that program is called the right of self-determination. It's found under peaceful settlement of disputes.
And what is peaceful settlement of disputes?
Peaceful settlement means that, specifically, I'll pull it off the top of my head, but it says the establishment of a sovereign and independent state, the free association or integration with an independent state, or the emergence into another political status freely determined by a people constitute the modes of implementing this right of self-determination by that people. So, and every nation on this planet exists, from however old the planet is or however long they've been forming nation states and societies. I don't like to use the word nation state really because it's society. People coming together to form their own society, and every society, every nation state that exists on this planet today exists because of this right of self-determination.
And everybody, or all the different nations, have recognized this in their constitution and as public policy, so to speak?
Absolutely. You'll find international law mentioned in almost, well, I haven't read every constitution on the planet. There's thousands of them. But you'll find that they do. They follow international law. And I actually found that in international law, there was a comment that was very almost peculiar when I first read it because I didn't understand it at the time. It said that constitutional precepts are of an international public order. So even the Constitution of the United States is of an international public order, which is why it mentions the treaties and why it mentions the law of nations.
So, are you saying that the reason the powers that be today don't really appear to give a spit about the Constitution is because they know that it really is not in effect for these people that call themselves Americans?
Well, they've never cared about the common man. That's the whole point. And if you watch, there's another little series you can watch. I loved it, Patrick. On PBS, there's one about John Hamilton. And Hamilton was considered to be an elitist, especially by the men back then. I mean, he kept being called an elitist, and his attitude was, well, what do you want us to do? Go get the common man, the drunk beggars and stuff off the street and have them come up here and run the government? They didn't care. They did not care. That was bottom line. And as a matter of fact, it was only the governors and the white male landowners that had the right to vote